Hello, Emily here from Homemade Emily Jane. Today I'm very excited to share with you one of my quilty secret weapons. If you are a modern quilter like me, then you definitely know the importance of having accurate cuts, and you also know just how time consuming and tedious it can be to cut out all of those pieces with your rotary cutter and your standard quilting rulers. So let me tell you about the Stripology Quilting Ruler like this one. This is a Stripology XL ruler. These rulers are massive and quite an investment, but let me tell you, they're worth every penny. These rulers were designed by Gudrun Elra of GE Designs, and Gudrun herself actually has lots of tutorials up as well teaching you how to use the rulers. So if this tutorial isn't enough for you, I'll definitely include a link below for lots more tutorials from Gudrun herself. Throughout this video, I'm going to share with you how I use my Stripology XL ruler. That's this giant one here. It's definitely the one that I would recommend, and I'll put a link for it in the description below. There are a few other types of Stripology rulers I want you to be aware of as well as you go searching for your favorite Stripology ruler. You'll see that there is a Stripology Squared as well as a Stripology Squared Mini ruler out on the market as well. I personally don't have either of those, and I find that the Stripology XL gives me everything that I need it to. So that's my personal recommendation. Now, if you are fairly new to quilting and you're a beginner and you're not quite sure how to use a classic traditional rotary cutter and quilting ruler, I have the perfect beginner quilting tutorial for you for how to cut fabric. Start with that video and then come back and watch this one about the Stripology ruler. That'll give you a great base foundation, and I even show you in that video how I prep my fabric. Lots of quilters differ on how they choose to prep their fabric before cutting. I personally use best press and iron out any wrinkles to get my fabric nice and crisp. Some people like to pre-wash. I personally do not pre-wash, but some people do. So I recommend that you try out a few different methods and find out what works best for you. So once you've prepped your fabric, we can go ahead and dive in. I'll show you exactly how to use a Stripology quilting ruler, just like the Stripology XL. So you'll see I've got my cutting mat, my fabric, and a rotary cutter right here. The first thing that I'll do, you'll see I've got my fabric folded just the way it comes off the bolt with my two selvages here at the bottom. And then you're gonna wanna fold your fabric in half once more, bringing that folded edge to the selvages, and make sure you line it up so that it's nice and straight. If it gets a little wonky, that can mess with your fabric grain, and that can create lots more fraying. So we want to try to avoid the fraying as much as possible. Once you've got that fold nice and lined up, you can go ahead and grab your Stripology ruler. I've got my Stripology right here. I place it on top of my fabric, and let me just show you the way around the Stripology real fast. You'll see that there is a line for 0, and all of these little lines, there's a slit in the ruler with a little teardrop shape at the base, and then a slit that goes all the way up to another teardrop shape here at the top. So you're going to want to use these markings down at the bottom to read so that you know exactly how wide your strips are as you're cutting them. You'll always want to cut at 0 and then again at whatever increments you're doing. So very common increments are listed here on the ruler. 1.5 inch cuts are notated with the stars, so you could easily just eyeball it looking for the stars as you go across. 2.5 inch cuts are notated with squares, so you would cut at 0 and then 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5, and so on. And you can easily find those just by looking for the shapes. I personally am cutting 4.5 inch strips today. So I've gone ahead and just with a little Sharpie marker, drawn a little line at 4.5, 9, 13.5, and 18. So I can easily get 4.5 inch with the fabric strips without repositioning the ruler at all. So now that I've gone over those basics, we'll position our ruler so that we have a little bit of excess fabric coming off the edge here at the 0 line. We're going to begin by cutting on 0, but we'll move it so that we can use the horizontal lines across the fabric on the ruler and line those up nice and straight so that our ruler stays straight and we can get nice, clean, crisp straight lines. So once your ruler is lined up, I like to check the top and the bottom. You can go ahead and grab your rotary cutter and we're ready to start cutting. I like to press it here, holding down right at this little edge. It keeps it from sliding. And then we'll put our blade right in that first teardrop shape and cut it at 0. Now without moving the ruler at all, we'll continue cutting our way across. As I mentioned, I'm doing 4.5-inch strips. You could do any width that you need for your project. I put the rotary cutter in here at 4.5 and slide it up. Then I reposition my rotary cutter, keeping the ruler exactly where it is. This time I'm at 9 inches, slide it up, and then so on and so forth. You repeat that process at whatever increments you need, being super careful that you're holding down the ruler with one hand, but not too close that you end up getting close to the line that you're cutting on. So you'll see here, I'm cutting at 18 next. I'm gonna keep my hand a good 3 or 4 slices away from the one that I'm actually cutting on. So I'm not getting anywhere near my fingers as I'm cutting. Once you've made it to the end of whatever sizes you're able to cut, you can remove your ruler and you'll see we are left with our little scrappy piece. That's just our raw edge. We can throw that away. And then we have our width of fabric strips already cut. And then whatever excess you have, you can save that for later. So I'm actually going to be keeping these strips as with the fabric strips for this specific project, but I do want to share with you how to then cut squares or rectangles out of your strips that you just cut. You would simply stack them and line them up. I've lined up here 4 layers, so 2 pieces of with the fabric strips still folded at a time, and then that's 2 of each. So then I can very easily once again place my Stripology ruler on top, making sure to line up that 0 line right here with being able to cut off the selvages of the fabric, and then lining up these horizontal lines with the edges of my fabric. And then I could very simply take my rotary cutter and then cut squares. So if I needed to cut 4.5 inches again, or maybe if I needed to cut a different size, you can very easily do that using the same method that I showed you before, cutting at 0 first and then cutting at whatever increments you need until you've made your way across the Stripology ruler. When you lift it up, you'll have all of your pieces cut. I hope you enjoyed this brief tutorial on how to use the Stripology XL quilting ruler, just like this one. You are now prepped and ready to go to cut out strips super efficiently and effectively, and then even turn those strips into squares and rectangles as you go. I'd love to share, I have a few quilt patterns that work out really well with using the Stripology ruler. You can find all of those linked down below. And then I also have an article sharing this step-by-step tutorial over on my website, homemadeemilyjane.com. And I'll link to this specific article in the description below for you as well. Now, if you've been around here for any amount of time, you might know that I am also equally obsessed with a product called AccuQuilt. AccuQuilt is another wonderful tool for streamlining the fabric cutting process, giving you efficient and accurate cuts in a breeze. I personally, when I'm doing my quilts, I use a mix between the Stripology and the AccuQuilt cutter. So if you want to learn more about when I choose AccuQuilt versus Stripology, make sure you head over to my website. I do share a little bit more there, and maybe you'll even find a way to combine the two in your quilting projects just like I do as well. If you are unfamiliar with AccuQuilt and you want to learn more, check out this tutorial here for everything you need to know about how to use AccuQuilt. I have quite a few videos about AccuQuilt up already, so I'm sure you can find lots more quilting inspiration over there. AccuQuilt is a die cutting machine, so you don't actually use the rotary cutter for cutting out your pieces. It can be very beneficial for people that have any sort of joint pain or mobility issues. Arthritis is a very common one. So I definitely recommend checking out AccuQuilt too. It all just depends on your your budget and what you're looking for out of your quilting experience. They're both amazing tools, and I highly recommend AccuQuilt as well as the Stripology Ruler. Lastly, I really hope you found this tutorial to be super helpful and useful for you in your quilting journey. If you did, I sure hope you'll subscribe to this channel and make sure you head over to homemadeemilyjane.com for lots more quilting tips, tricks, and inspiration. And as always, if you have any questions, drop a comment below. I would love to hear from you. Happy sewing!